Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Mixed Martial Analysis, where we're going to be taking a look at the UFC on ESPN 9, Woodley versus Burns card, coming up this weekend on May 30th, Saturday. And before we get into breaking that down, though, let's talk. There have been a bunch of fight announcements that have come out over like the past week, and a lot of them are really, really big deals. Like Carl Robertson versus Marvin Vettori gets moved to June 13th, and if you guys saw how pissed off Vettori was about I think Robertson had issues cutting weight and I don't know if it was directly related to weight cutting. I think it was, and he got transported to the hospital, but that's rescheduled, and that's a really interesting fight and a big fight at middleweight for two of the more promising guys in the division. Let's see, there's some bigger ones. Neil Magny. I'm just going through MMAJunkie.com, by the way. That's where I get like a vast majority of my MMA news. Neil Magny versus Anthony Rocco Martin. That's a great fucking fight. Let's see. Sorry. Oh, here's one that I'm really excited for. Cory Sandhagen and Aljamain Sterling are going to fight at UFC 250. And bantamweight has a lot of figuring out to do, right? And I think, like we've talked about this before, but one of the reasons that you saw like Dominic Cruz be able to kind of leapfrog everyone despite his layoff is, I think Henry Cejudo said this in an interview too, but he's right. There's no real number one contender at 135. Like, I think there's four people that you really got to worry about there. And then a lot of people like in the mix below them, obviously, that are on the cusp of title contention. But there's like, to me, there's Cory Sandhagen, Aljamain Sterling, Petr Yan, and I mean, you can never take Marlon Moraes out of the equation, right? Because he beat Jose Aldo recently, so he's technically coming off a win. I think he's going to fight Petr Yan for the title, right? So those four have to have like a tournament of sorts to figure out what's going on there. And then the rest of the division, I think, is going to work itself out. Don't forget, too, you got like Pedro Munoz. Can't forget about him, man. He's on a tear right now, too, looking like one of the best guys there. But I really think that the top three are probably – you can't discount Moraes, man. I just feel like it's not that I'm discounting him. It's just that it's like he's had the opportunity to win the title. And then like he had the opportunity to fight Jose Aldo. And when Jose Aldo was moving down, and he looked great early on in the fights, right? But as it wears on, you see this huge like cardio problem. And Yan doesn't seem to have that. So like, to me, it's like, it's not that it's not a good fight. It is, and Marlon Moraes could absolutely win. I mean, he's on a like I said, he tapped out. Who was it? I think he tapped out a Sun Sal, right, with an armbar, knocked out Aljamain Sterling. So it's like it's hard to deny his worthiness, but it just feels like, I don't know, he's in a weird situation. But anyway, definitely can't discount him, and I think he's fighting Yan for the title if I'm remembering correctly. But Sandhagen and Sterling is a big fight, and I'm guessing the winner of that is going to get the title shot against the winner of Petr Yan and Marlon Moraes. So a lot to look forward to at 135. I think aside from 155 pounds, 135 is the deepest weight class. There's so much fucking talent down there, man. It's unbelievable. Let's see. Sean O'Malley is going to be fighting Eddie Wineland on that same card. Shane Burgos is fighting Josh Emmett on June 20th. Let's see. Joseph Benavidez and Davison Figueiredo are going to rematch for the vacant UFC flyweight title, because if you remember, Figueiredo beat Benavidez but ended up missing weight, so he wasn't eligible to win the title. So that title still remains vacant. And with Henry Cejudo announcing retirement, it kind of eliminates doubt that he's going to move down to that weight class. And, you know, I think these are the two best guys at 125 right now, so it'll be interesting to see him go at it again and see if Benavidez can solve the puzzle this time. Let's see. Chase Hooper versus Alex Caceres is a good fight. Sorry, there's so much to catch up on over this past week, and I haven't had a chance to do one of these, so it's like, another big one. One of the more important fights at 155 that you can, Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker. That's a great fucking fight. Most likely going to end up being a stand-up war. Two guys that are very technical. Dustin Poirier has great boxing, and I mean, Dan Hooker's looked amazing of late. So a huge fight for both guys, and kind of a risky one for Dustin Poirier, man. I mean, like, it feels like Poirier, for whatever reason, has been having trouble getting fights, though. Like, he wants Tony, he wants Nate Diaz. And I think he can hang with – he's one of the best in the world. So it's good to see him go up against a guy in Hooker. But I think a guy who's a little bit lower in the rankings than Poirier, right? I kind of thought Poirier would end up fighting someone like Ferguson. But then you got to consider, like, Poirier's got to fight again. And Ferguson just took a beating, so it's going to be a while before he's cleared medically to return, right? So you got to do something in the meantime. And I think Dan Hooker's City Kickboxing, especially, and just that entire gym, like, they're the real deal. And I think Dustin Poirier realizes that, and I think that a win over Dan Hooker is still a very big win, regardless of where he's ranked. I think that still does a lot for Dustin Poirier's resume and his, I still think it helps him out if he can get a win over a guy like that. It's a really fucking good matchup. All right. I think that hit most of the big ones. I know I'm probably missing one or two. Speaking of Pedro Munoz, we talked about him earlier. Frankie Edgar's going to make his bantamweight debut against him on July 11th. Shamil Abdurakhimov versus Cyril Gane on that same card. And then there's, just like rumors going around about, you got to wonder what's going to happen at 170 pounds, right? Because you got Jorge Masvidal sitting there. He's been tearing through guys, obviously has one of the most iconic knockouts in UFC history over Ben Askren. And Kamaru Usman is the champion at 170 pounds, right? And I just feel like it's hard to deny anybody. It's hard to give anybody at 170 the title shot over Jorge Masvidal. But I don't know. I'm hearing and I don't know. I'm just seeing shit on Twitter, right? But it looks like Jorge Masvidal wants to fight Nate Diaz. And then you got Kamaru Usman saying, on Instagram and stuff, calling Conor McGregor out. So there's so much going on at 170. And you got to look at Leon Edwards. I don't know if he's booked for a fight or not. I don't think he is, but you got to think that a sensible matchup for him is going to be a guy like Colby Covington next. If he's not going to get his title shot, especially because Woodley's fighting Gilbert Burns this weekend. He's already booked up. And you just got to have Usman versus Conor, man. I don't know. I don't know if Conor's going to take that on. And Usman's a big guy, man. And I think that Conor, his power would translate to 170, but it's I don't know, man. If Usman gets a hold of him, I think it's just going to be what happened with Khabib, except potentially worse. Or more I think Conor will have more trouble getting back to his feet against a guy the size of Usman. And, I mean, that's saying a great deal considering what happened against Khabib, So, I don't know. It's a tough matchup for Conor. And as with most of his fights, I think if he wanted to have a chance, he would have to end it early. But, We're talking in hypotheticals here. I doubt that fight will actually. To me, the fight that makes the most sense is Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal. But like I said, Masvidal's in this interesting place in his career where he just kind of has complete control over where he wants to go. He's such a big star now that any fight that he takes is going to be. Let's say he fights Conor, huge fight. Let's say he fights Usman, that's a big fight. Let's say he fights Nate Diaz again, that's a huge fight. I mean, the guy's in a position that he's never been in before. So it's not like he has to fight for the title right now. He could be thinking I'm going to fight for whatever's going to bring me in the most money and be best for me long term. The belt, and especially if he's feeling confident right now, take the belt's going to be there, man. If you keep winning, and especially if he wins these money fights, the belt's going to be there. But, I don't know. I feel like also, a fight between Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz kind of makes sense because, I know that Jorge dominated him for what there was of it, but Nate is gritty and Nate can turn the tide late in fights. And the fact that that thing got stopped over that cut was, extremely disappointing. But I'd watch him fight again. I'd watch Conor and Nate fight again. There's so many matchups that you can make right now, and it's almost the 170-pound weight class is in a weird spot because Usman also just knocked off Covington. So you're not going to want to see that fight again right away without seeing Covington go beat somebody. And like I said, the guy waiting, the other person that makes a lot of sense is Leon Edwards, but how big of a pay-per-view is that? I'm just being honest. Leon Edwards is an extremely talented fighter and one of the more underappreciated guys at 170. He's got a complete tool set. He's very good. He's a problem for a lot of guys in the weight class. But I also think that Usman already beat him, right? Let me double check that to make sure I'm not lying to you. But I'm pretty sure that he did. And it's just not as big a fight as Usman fighting somebody like Conor or somebody like Masvidal. I'm almost positive he beat him. Yeah, he did early on in 2015. But he beat Leon Edwards via unanimous decision already. So it's like there are just bigger fights to be made right now. And I think Leon Edwards kind of needs that one. If he could beat Colby Covington, people would be like, oh shit, like this guy is for real. You know, not that people don't already say that, but that would kind of be the one that I think puts him over the top and kind of puts him in the title, an actual title conversation. You know, I think right now the UFC is just they're gonna have a hard time selling his name over some of the other guys, and I think they kind of know that. And especially amidst all this Corona stuff, you're gonna want to make big money when you put on the events, right? So you might see. I don't know. You might see Kamaru Usman versus Conor. I doubt it, but you might see it, especially like if Jorge does decide to fight Nate. So we'll see. Interesting. Sorry, I got off on a tangent there, but let's see. Any other news that I want to hit? On this card, Kevin Holland was forced off it due to injury. And I didn't read any specifics of it, but the fight against Daniel Rodriguez is going to be canceled. Well, I think they're going to be looking for a replacement for Rodriguez. I don't know who that is as of right now, but I don't want to say I'm glad that this happened, and I know that Holland got a quick knockout in his last win, and a quick turnaround kind of makes sense sometimes. But I'll tell you what, man. Daniel Rodriguez, dangerous boxer, southpaw, crafty, trains at 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, so he's going to have some sneaky stuff. I just don't think that, like, sometimes I'm not sure that turning around right off of a victory and just fighting again is the best thing to do. Like, you went through an entire camp, most likely, right? And, I mean, assuming that you didn't fight on short notice or anything, and I'm just speaking in generalities here now. But you most likely just went through a camp preparing for a certain guy, and you went in there and you just fought and you picked up the win and like you accomplished it. And it's like, I just kind of feel like it would be smart to give yourself time to like soak it in, recenter, and then refocus on somebody else before just like riding that. There's an argument for riding that confidence, but riding it against a guy who's as dangerous as Daniel Rodriguez is risky, man. I didn't like this fight matchup. Like, it was much more interesting to me had Kevin Holland had full time to prepare, but I don't think Daniel Rodriguez is a guy that you just want to hop in and fight on short notice. Like I said, there's something to be said about keeping up momentum, and absolutely, like, so, and I don't know. I'm not Kevin Holland. I don't know how he's feeling. Maybe, you know what I mean? But I almost think this might be a blessing in disguise because, like I said, Daniel Rodriguez is a very dangerous guy, and Kevin Holland trying to fight 2 times in the past month. And all this like travel and the restrictions and stuff, and you got to wonder how that's impacting you and your ability to train fully. And like, this guy's kind of been singularly focused, and now you've got 2 problems that have been presented to you in a short amount of time that you have to solve, right? Like, you solved the first one, but now you got to try to solve another. And it's almost like cramming for an exam. I feel like it's not quite like that. Like, I know that sometimes like fighting is just getting in there, and a lot of it's reacting to what's going on and stuff, right? But like, preparing definitely helps 100%. So I don't know, potential blessing in disguise for Kevin Holland there. And I'm interested to see who they match up for Daniel Rodriguez, because you're talking about a guy who's 11-1, and like I said, great boxer and some solid jiu-jitsu too, man. He's got some submission wins on his record, so he's a guy to watch out for on this card if they can get someone in there to face him. All right, let's kick things off though by going over the main card. And first off, your first fight is going to be Mackenzie Dern versus Hannah Cyphers. And this is, whenever you think about Mackenzie Dern, you're instantly going to jump to jiu-jitsu because it's the most like impressive part of her game. And she's so credentialed. I mean, multiple time world champion, right? Both gi and no gi. And just, it's evident that when she gets girls to the ground that they are at a very, very, they're at a huge disadvantage. Like, she's on another level with her jiu-jitsu. Like, her paths to the back and just her ability to sink things in on you, it's next level, man. And but in her last fight, she ran into Amanda Hebos, and Amanda Hebos is a very good. She's got some length on. Mackenzie, and she was able to kind of dot her up at range and stuff. And then Mackenzie wasn't able to have as much success on the ground, and that's because Hebos is also a very good jiu-jitsu practitioner. And what worries me about this matchup against Hannah Cyphers is that I think Hannah is gonna lack that ground experience. That's gonna. It's like, okay, Mackenzie, the thing you have to worry about with Mackenzie Dern is that she also has serious power in her hands. Like, if you look at her, yes, she got a rear naked choke over Amanda Cooper, but if you look at what started it off, it was a punch landed by Mackenzie Dern that dropped Amanda and led to the submission. So she's definitely got power in her hands. It's not like her striking might not be the most technical thing you've ever seen. You know what I mean? You're going to be able to pick out flaws in it, but she's capable of hitting you and dropping you. And I just think that, like, in these lighter weight classes, I think Hannah Cyphers is going to lack that. Like, she might be able to piece Mackenzie Dern up in, like, certain situations. Like, if she gets into some dirty boxing exchanges, she might be able to land some shots there and stuff. But I don't think she's going to have that, like, game-changing power that's going to really rock Mackenzie. I think Mackenzie's going to have the advantage in the power department, and I think she's going to be pretty confident in that, and that's going to let her kind of stand and bang with Hannah. And I think that, like I said, Hannah's going to have to get into some, like, she's going to have to close the distance against Mackenzie and try to land these shots, right? I just think that Hannah's advantage, if anything, she has an advantage in boxing, but I just think that the way she's going to have to attack Mackenzie is going to lead to Mackenzie taking her down and submitting her at some point. And once it gets there, like, I think Mackenzie's going to be competent enough on the feet to hang with Hannah, but once it goes to the ground, it's just a completely different fight. I don't think Hannah's going to be able to do anything to stop Mackenzie from doing what she wants to do. I think Mackenzie will pick up a submission in the first round in this fight. Hannah's a tough girl, man, and, like, she's got some really good wins on her record. And like I said, she does have solid boxing, but I just think in her, like, Mackenzie is going to present her with power, and she's going to be able to strike as well. And when Hannah starts overextending in these striking combinations and just, like, trying to connect with her, it's going to open up the takedown for Mackenzie. It's going to be there at some point, and I think once it gets there, it's going to be a clear advantage for Mackenzie Dern. I'm going first round submission, maybe second, but I do think Mackenzie Dern's going to get Hannah Cyphers out of there. All right. Moving on to a lightweight bout between 9-1 Roosevelt Roberts and Brock Weaver, who's 15-4. Roosevelt Roberts, very long guy, man, very long, and very smooth boxing, very smooth with his hands. He's good on the ground. You saw him pick up a unanimous decision win over Thomas Gifford. And, I mean, really just Roosevelt Roberts it's hard to explain his fighting style a little bit. Like, okay, he's almost too patient. Like, one of the things that when I watch Roosevelt Roberts fights, he'll, like, wait on things. Like, when he fought Vince Pichel and he lost a decision in that fight, one of the problems is that he was just letting Pichel go first. And when he does that against some, like, lower level competition, like, you get away with it a little bit more because you can make up the ground, but against a guy like Pichel who's going to keep the pace on you and just keep that shit up, you know what I mean? Like, you can't really get away with that. And I think if there's a flaw to be pointed out in Roosevelt Roberts' game, because he's very technically sound, he's very smooth, he's got lightning fast hand, he's got good kicks, and he's got a good ground game. I mean, he's very well-rounded. One of the things that he can struggle with, like I said, sometimes he'll let guys go first. And like I said, when he goes first, he's able to make up ground. But against a guy like Pichel, who's, like, constant pressure and just, like, keeping it pouring on you, it's difficult, right? I really think that you got to be calculated about it, and you can't get too wild. But I really think that if Roosevelt Roberts fought more aggressively, he would draw more out of his opponents, and he would draw these openings, and he'd be able to find finishes a little bit easier. I think he's got a ton of talent. Like I said, he's very technically sound, and his hands are so fucking fast. But I think that if he added just a little bit of aggression to his game, when he starts landing, what do guys want to do when they're getting landed on? They're going to want to fire back. They're going to cover up. They're going to want to stay safe, but they're also going to want to fire back and land it on you. And when you draw that out of people, that's when he can really start letting stuff shine, when he's like, slipping counters and then countering back on his own. I think that if you saw him just get a little bit more, turn it up a little bit more, you'd see him pick up more finishes, especially at like the UFC level. I think he needs to do that because he's going to run into guys like Brock Weaver who over the course of the fight are just going to keep coming and are going to want to hang out in the pocket and are just going to want to keep putting a pace on you. You know what I mean? So this is a really interesting matchup, man, because I think that if you look at any one specific area, except maybe like dirty boxing, like close in the clinch, just because Weaver's got he's a little bit more compact, he might have an advantage there. But if you look at like just general striking and just general, I think Roosevelt Roberts has an advantage everywhere in this fight. But if Brock Weaver fights him super aggressive, and if Roosevelt isn't putting out the volume himself to kind of match Brock, you might see Roosevelt get down in this fight, get down rounds in this fight. I think it's going to be hard for Brock to put Roosevelt away because of his length and stuff. But you might see Brock Weaver just fight a grindy, gritty type of fight and wear on Roosevelt Roberts. All that being said, I'm expecting him to kind of look at like what happened against Pichot and like realize that you're successful when you're going first, and like you're gonna make guys make mistakes when you're putting like a calculated pressure on them. Like if you apply that to the Brock Weaver fight, if he does that, if he applies that mentality in like that game, I think that you'll see the best Roosevelt Roberts we've seen. I think you'll see him get a finish over Brock Weaver. But if he lets Weaver put a pace on him, and he's not like maintaining his distance and just keeping volume in his face and stuff and making Weaver make mistakes, if he's letting him control the pace of the fight, push things up against the cage once in a while, because Weaver's, like I said, a strong guy. You don't want to be having your back on the cage when he's going to be trying to take you down and make this a gritty fight and land shots in the clinch. So I'm going Roberts. I think Roberts is going to – I think you're going to see him come out and you're going to see him kind of match the pace and the intensity, and this is going to – I think that he'll get a finish in this fight. I do think it's a very good fight. I think it could go either way. Like I said, keys for Weaver, I think he has to make it kind of gritty and wear on him over the course of the fight. And key for Roberts is just, man, maintain your distance. Keep calculated pressure on him. Keep the jab out in his face. Keep hitting him with leg kicks. Keep hitting him open him up. I think Roberts, like I said, has an advantage everywhere. It's just a matter of whether he puts it all together. If he's slow in this fight and he's not going first, you might see him start getting behind. All right, Kevin Holland versus Daniel Rodriguez is obviously canceled. And next in the co-main event is a heavyweight bout between Blagoy Ivanov and Augusto Sakai. I'm probably mispronouncing that. I'm sorry if so. But Sakai is a guy who fought in Bellator, and, he's got 11 knockouts on his record. 14 wins, 11 of them are knockouts, only 3 decisions. And he most recently coming off, he knocked Marcin Tybura out in under a minute. So the problem is that he's going up against a guy in Ivanov who, and I mean, Augusto in the fight before that fought Andrei Arlovsky, beat him via split decision, right? Okay, so he's fought one of the more elite guy, an older guy, but he's fought a veteran before. But he's fighting a guy in Ivanov who has kind of been in this position before against Tai Tuivasa. And I think that win was somewhat, I can't remember the fight exactly off the top of my head, but I think it was somewhat controversial. Like, I think Tai Tuivasa was able to find moments of success in that fight, but I think that it was just like one of those moments where Tai Tuivasa was really like tearing through had a lot of hype behind him in that division and stuff because he had such good boxing and was so heavy-handed, and you kind of saw, and you see guys like Arlovsky, and you see guys like sometimes they still end up paying the price, and guys like Ivanov, right? And like sometimes they are just able to lean on that veteran experience to slow the fight down and negate some of the power that these guys have. And after they get them out of the first round, their odds of surviving are so much better, right? So if they can fight these technical slow fights, kind of like you saw Ivanov do to Tuivasa, where he was like a lot of clinching, a lot of like negating the power and stuff, and just like might not be the most exciting, but some of these veterans have figured out a way to slow it down. And couple that with the fact that Ivanov is a world champion Sambo. practitioner. And I mean, he's going to be able to lean on you, and he's going to be able to wrestle you, and he has submissions in his pocket, and he's got power in his hands. I think that this is probably the toughest fight that Augusto Sakai has run into yet in his career. I'm looking at big names on his record like Czech Congo, split decision. Arlovsky, split decision. He knocked out Chase Sherman, knocked out Tybura, but I think that this is a really tough fight for Augusto Sakai. And don't get me wrong, he definitely has. When you're talking about heavyweights, you're talking about, it's impossible to predict, right? But keep in mind that Blagoy Ivanov has never been knocked out in his mixed martial arts career. 18-3-0. He's handed out 6 knockouts, six submissions, and only 6 of his wins have come by decision, right? So odds are he finishes most of his fights. He's kind of struggled to do that since he's entered the UFC. But, you know, I'm going with the veteran in this one. I think that Ivanov's going to be able to slow the pace of the fight down, wear on Sakai. And you kind of saw Sakai when he had to fight like Chase Sherman into the 3rd round. I guess he was able to pour it on, but he was still tired. I think that Ivanov's pace is going to be a little bit more controlled over the course of the fight. So he'll be more consistent from round to round. And I think when it gets into like the middle of the 2nd and the 3rd round, you're going to really see Ivanov take over. I think Augusto's best chance to finish this fight is early on against a guy like Ivanov, because like I said, if he gets a hold of you, just that Sambo background, he's going to wear on you, and he's going to wear on your arms and your legs, and he's just going to wear you out, man. And by the middle of the 2nd round, I think the fight will, if it gets there, I think it shifts in favor of Ivanov considerably, especially if he's able to march forward. And like I said, lean on some of that grappling experience. I've got Ivanov in this one. I think it'll go the distance, and I think don't be surprised if this isn't quite a barn burner, man. Don't be surprised if Ivanov's turning this into kind of like a boring wear on Augusto type of fight, and I think he'll pick up the win, like I said, via decision. All right, next, the main event between number 1 ranked Tyron Woodley and number 6 ranked Gilbert Burns. This fight is interesting because it's Tyron Woodley's first fight back since his loss to Kamaru Usman. And that was a fight in which, like, Woodley just looked flat. And, I mean, part of that was just because of the pace that Kamaru was putting on him and how relentless it was, and just, like, his wrestling was so overwhelming. You know what I mean? And Woodley's a great wrestler himself. So that it's like, I think it was a combination of a little bit, like, but I think Woodley was a little flat in that fight. And I think that, like, Woodley will oftentimes, like, have a tendency to, like, he has so much power in his right hand. Like, he can always rely on it. And because of that, like, he's always got it corked. Like, he knows it. And he'll let guys push him backwards a little bit. But against a guy like Usman, who's just going to be looking to close that space on you and push you up and hold you up against the cage, like, a lot of guys aren't able to do that to Woodley, right? So I think that you just saw a stylistic flaw, like, in Woodley's game. Like, if you pressure him and if you can out wrestle him, I think you can outwork the guy. You know what I mean? Like, Usman kind of proved that. But when you're fighting guys like Darren Till and Stephen Thompson, who prefer open space and striking, he's so explosive, and his ability to cover that distance and land shots on you is, I mean, incredible. That's why he dropped both Darren Till and Stephen Thompson when he fought them, right? He's just got so much power in his right hand, and he covers massive amounts of distance with it, right? But he's fighting a little bit of a different guy in this one. He's fighting Gilbert Burns, who is a world champion jiu-jitsu player and who has knockout power in his own right. Knocked out Damian Maia, and then with a left hook, I believe. And then who did he? I got to look it up. I can't remember the guy's name. He knocked another guy out with a right hook. So it's like Gilbert Burns has, like, one-shot knockout power in his punches. Not that he's going to necessarily be able to connect that on Tyron Woodley like he did on a guy like Maia or who was it? Was it Dan Murray? I think it was Dan Murray. Maybe Jason saw. I can't fucking remember which one it was. But my point is, this guy is, again, another world champion jiu-jitsu player on this card, but he has knockout power, man, and his striking, it's very technical and it's very efficient, and he has a great outside leg kick. And when you're fighting a guy like Tyron Woodley, who's going to be a wrestler, like I said, he puts a lot of power in his punches, especially when he's trying to come through with that right hand. If you beat up and he's a wrestler, so you beat up the lead leg of Tyron Woodley, and you are going to slow down, I think, a lot of the things that make Tyron Woodley a successful MMA fighter. The question is he going to be able to implement that? I don't think that Woodley is going to necessarily like be looking. I don't know, man. I don't think that Woodley's going to be afraid to go to the ground with Gilbert Burns if it's on his terms. Like Woodley's a big, strong guy, and he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu as well. And he's, like I said, he's got a powerful wrestling base. So if he's on top of you, I'm not saying it's a smart idea to just like go out and take Gilbert Burns down, because like Woodley does have good boxing and good power, right? But I don't think that Woodley's going to be afraid to go to the ground with Burns. Woodley's so fucking big and strong. And like I said, if he's on top, if he can get it there on his terms, I think he'll find success on top. Also, Gilbert Burns is, I think, going to struggle to take Tyron Woodley down. If so, Tyron Woodley he's incredibly explosive, and he has incredibly strong hips. If Gilbert Burns' timing isn't perfect, and even then, even if his like follow through isn't perfect, Woodley is going to be a really fucking hard guy to get to the ground for Burns, I think. Like, don't get me wrong, Burns has some nice takedown setups, and it's better than a lot of the jiu-jitsu guys you see who like Damian Maia, his entire game plan is to get you to the ground, right? But his takedowns aren't exactly like explosive, and they can be predictable at times and stuff. A lot of jiu-jitsu guys struggle with that. I think Gilbert Burns has a nice shot and everything, but against a guy like Tyron Woodley, I don't think the takedowns are going to be there for him, and I don't think that Burns is going to be able to hold Woodley up against the cage. I think in those positions, Woodley's going to be winning those exchanges, you know what I mean? So I think that what Burns is going to have to do is beat up the lead leg of Woodley and just pick him apart and wear on him over time. If you wear on him, then the takedowns might come later on in the rounds after you've done some damage, and if you can get Woodley making some mistakes due to fatigue or just being, losing the fight. But I just don't think that Gilbert Burns is going to be able to assert himself against Woodley, because Woodley has that power, and I think that when you're in there and you're standing across from him, it creates hesitation, because you know that when you come in there, there's always a possibility, like Darren Till, when he came in and got dropped, right? Like, that when you move in on this guy, the consequences can be lethal, and I think that keeps guys off them, especially when they actually get in there with them. I think Tyron Woodley's going to win this fight and get back on track. I think that Gilbert Burns is a great competitor and perhaps a future title challenger. His jiu-jitsu, and he might prove me wrong in this fight, man, like I said, but I just think his game plan has to be a little bit more methodical. And you got on a strong guy like Woodley, like, I think he's going to have to pick him apart on the feet and then start maybe trying to engage in some grappling situations when he's the fresher fighter. But early on, I think that Woodley's going to have a massive advantage in terms of strength, and I don't think Burns will be able to get him down. I think you're going to see Woodley get a finish in this fight. I just don't know how or when. He's like, that right hand makes things so unpredictable, and it's just like, you also, like I said, you have to consider where's Woodley's head at after the last fight. What kind of fight is he going to fight? Is he going to be the one who wants to like assert himself because it happened to him last time? There's a lot of variables, right? But I think Woodley's going to find a way to get it done in this one and get back on track and kind of, reassert himself as one of the best. Already is, undoubtedly, right? But he puts himself back in like title contention. He's got to go get a good win, especially after like how dominant the loss was to Kamaru Usman. So this is a good one for him to get back on track and get his name back in the mix for actually fighting for the title again. But yeah, I'm taking Woodley. Good fight card though. And like I said, a bunch of matchups just got announced for the upcoming months, that a lot of them with really important implications, and especially bantamweight and lightweight with the announcements of Cory Sandhagen and Sterling, and then Dan Hooker and Poirier. Those are both huge fucking fights. But yeah, let's recap the card real quick. So for the main card, I'm taking Mackenzie Dern over Hannah Cyphers, Roosevelt Roberts over Brock Weaver. That's a really good fight though. Holland versus Rodriguez is off. I'll try, if they announce an opponent soon enough for Rodriguez, I'll try to put out another video just doing a quick breakdown on that fight. And then I'm taking Ivanov over Sakai and Woodley over Burns. So yeah, it's a great fight card, man. A lot of good matchups, and but all these fights could go could go multiple different ways, right? Like, and for Burns especially, this is such a huge opportunity to cement himself as, again, you know, if he beats the number 1 ranked guy, he's an immediate title contention. He's in that talk immediately. Like, maybe a fight against Leon Edwards after this makes sense. I don't know. 170 is stacked, right? There's so much talent, especially like right in that top 5. So much fucking talent, and you feel like any of them could beat any of them on any given night, kind of. And Burns has an opportunity to prove that he belongs in that top 5. So, win over Woodley would be huge. But yeah. I think that wraps up everything I wanted to talk about. So thank you, everybody who tuned in. Much appreciated. If you are listening on YouTube right now, the podcast is also available via any major podcast platform provider, whatever. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play Store. You can find it there. And then if you're listening to the audio version right now, the video is available on YouTube. So yeah, check us out there. I think that wraps it up. Thank you. Bye-bye.